Hey, Dr. Anica here. I am so excited that you are joining us again for another episode. And this I've got with me a renowned author, Renee. She's an incredible writer, an amazing advocate and friend, and I'm so thrilled for all that she's going to share with us today. Thank you so much, Renee, for coming and being with
Thanks
us.
for having me.
Of course. So we're going to go right into it. So my first question for you is, given your work in activism, many areas that you focus on have included things like racism, education, class, for example. And needless to say, all of those things have been impacted by COVID-19. But are there any particular groups or populations you're most concerned about in this time?
Yeah, well, I'm really concerned about our young people, right? I'm concerned about school being out and that being such a critical time for them for obvious reasons of what are they learning? How are they learning? Do they have access to online learning? I know that a lot of schools are taking everything online, but I know a lot of young people who don't have computers or internet at their homes. And so I'm thinking of them for that reason and thinking of young people whose parents are essential workers. So they're not in the home while the young people are at home all day. So yeah, our young people are always the most vulnerable. And so when all of this started happening, my first thoughts and prayers were for our young people, for sure.
Absolutely. And they are, because of their age and limitations, there's only so much, right, that they even have control over or power over as they deal with a lot of this.
Yeah.
For you as a writer and an educator, I think you have an incredible gift of being able to speak to youth about really, really hard things. Again, I just mentioned earlier, things like racism, class, trauma, that sort of thing. How would you advise parents or caretakers about how to speak to their youth about the harsh realities of COVID-19?
I think it's okay to be honest with young people and to really maybe not even talk to them or at them, but just ask them questions and see what they're feeling and how they are taking all of this in. So not to assume that they're okay and not to assume that they're falling apart, but just to ask, what do you know? Do you have any questions? How are you doing? What do you need from me? I think it's important. Sometimes we as adults, we get so busy with the big picture problems, which are big and they deserve our attention, right? But young people still want to feel like they're a part of what's happening. And sometimes I think when we don't talk to them, we send a message that it's not okay to talk about your emotions. And you just got to push that aside and work to get to a solution.
Right.
So this is a crucial time to just say, I'm scared too. We don't know when this is going to end. But our people have gone through hard things before. So we're going to be okay. We're going to get through this, but it's going to be hard. And to just be honest and acknowledge that, I think is really important.
I love that. And the message I'm hearing in that is treat them like people.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, they're humans. They're people. They're just younger, but they have emotions and feelings, and sometimes they can't name them. So I think a lot of young people might be acting out or just acting in ways that are different than how they normally are. And that might be because of the stress and the grief and the trauma of everything that's happening. So I think it's important to set aside time to just talk with them and spend time with them, even if it's a really small amount of time, so that they know we're here, we care, we want to know how you're doing.
Absolutely. And I like that too, spending time with them, even if it's a small amount, because I think so often, given all the constraints, right, and the demands of working from home for some parents and still having to manage the house, now having to do online schooling and managing that, it can be that all the interactions you're having with your kid is you telling them to do something.
Yes.
And so making that time, it actually feels a little bit more intentional and perhaps even more positive than
for sure.
you finish your homework, For you, in the absence of school, I just mentioned online schooling, and I know that New York City is contemplating, there's some back and forth, but they're contemplating going remote for the entire length of the semester that's left. For them, a lot of kids are sort of without their typical outlets for expressing themselves artistically. School clubs and organizations, after school programs, all of them are sort of shut down. How would you sort of encourage or invite youth to express themselves or even pursue their artistic interests in this time, given their limited resources?
So I think about art being something that even if you have very limited materials, you can still create and make something. And that sometimes, I think that's actually a really powerful thing, that out of chaos and out of lack, you can kind of have some control over what you make and what you produce. And I think about even just hip hop coming from the Bronx and coming from very small beginnings, and then, you know, how it's kind of like taken over the world.
Yeah.
So you don't need a whole lot. You don't need necessarily right now a teacher to teach you how to write the poem, or, you know, the music class to be in. Craft is important, of course, and those types of things will come again. But you can also just make in your own house, in your own bedroom, in your own little corner. And I think that that can be an outlet for some of the stress and anger and questions and boredom that's happening. You can just create something, a song, a dance, a poem, write a story. I think our young people are super creative, and sometimes adults stifle that. So this is actually, I'm very interested into like what's going to come out of this. What are people going to create? And especially our young people, without boundaries and expectations, what are they going to make? So I encourage young people to make something. And if you can share it, that's fine. You know, if you can share it online, that's amazing and great. But it's also okay to make something for yourself and just keep a journal or keep a sketchbook and have your voice, expressing your voice in something that maybe no one else is going to hear for now because it's just for you.
Absolutely. And I, you know, even as an adult, I'm learning how to get in touch with my own imagination, right? Because I'm so pragmatic and I'm so practical that I find that sort of just whimsical part of me isn't always catered to. So I love the idea of inviting kids to really nurture that part of themselves especially in an age that's so full of technology and full of gadgets and external things, to kind of come back, right? To let's make cloud animals and let's figure out a story about what those animals are up to. It can really be beautiful. Yeah.
I mean, you will always have your imagination. No one can take that from you. And it's a powerful thing to exercise. So yeah, I think this is the perfect time to start making and dreaming big and figuring out what you want to say about what's happening in the world and who you are.
Absolutely. I know you also do a lot of nonprofit work. I Do Arts is one of your beloved creations. And I know I've had the pleasure working with you guys in that aspect of it. But nonprofits right now, they're also on the front lines for a lot of people. And they really have always been there to serve under-resourced groups and populations. And I can only imagine how much more that burden has expanded in the time of COVID-19. For you, when you think about policies, because I really believe that if there's any good that's come out of COVID, and again, I use good with quotes, I felt like it's underscored some of the inequities that exist in our society and the need for us to make some changes, right? Are there any social policies that you would like to see, I don't know, implemented, altered, or even eliminated that perhaps could yield a greater result for the vulnerable among us?
So I've been thinking about this, and I don't have one thing to point to, but like you, I'm excited about this. Well, I'm not even excited. I hope that we take advantage of the moment, and after this, that nonprofits have conversations even with each other about best practices and how do we think about fundraising so that it's not so like year to year, but how do we set up our organizations big picture and make sure that we have a surplus of resources for organizations that are serving Brown and Black children in particular and marginalized, under-resourced communities. How do we use our communities as assets also and not need necessarily an outside grant or a funder that is not a part of the community to fundraise and kind of gird up the organization. So I've been thinking about all of this before this happened, and then talking to some other executive directors and grantors. We are all kind of like, yeah, something has to happen, that we can't keep the way that nonprofits raise money, the way that nonprofits are so dependent on the government and grants to give money. That part of it is something that I hope something changes and comes out of that. I do not have any solutions right now, but I am thinking and wanting to be a part of that conversation because I think it's important. So yeah, there's a lot of follow-up, I think, to do after we get through this crisis. And again, not to say that this wasn't always already an issue, right? There's been a lot of talk as if this is something new, and a lot of us like, no, this is been an issue. We've been talking about it, but I think our voices are being amplified right now. And so I hope we can take advantage of that and kind of move the conversation forward.
Absolutely. A thought that just comes to mind now, it isn't a policy, but kind of what we see happening with the local governors in the tri-state area, in New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, in the absence of sort of like a national lockdown or any sort of national policy regarding the pandemic, they decide to come together and say, here's what we're going to do.
Right.
So that way we can take care of our people. And I'm wondering if in a similar way, a bit of a coalition could even happen among the nonprofits that serve a particular area of the city, of the country, that in times like these, rather, like you're saying, rather than look to the government or these external funders who may be reeling because Wall Street isn't cooperating or because their own donors are not giving as they used to, that coalition can kind of come along and say, what do you have? What do you have?
Right.
And then still perhaps better serve the vulnerable among us. But you're right. It's a hard thing to sort of really enact, particularly when we're in the thick of it, right?
Right. And I do see, I have noticed and been a part of some conversations where organizations are coming together and building bridges and networking and collaborating. And I think that that's a beautiful thing, and that should be the spirit in which we always work anyway. So I'm glad to see that, I think more and more we're realizing I can't do it all in this organization. So this is what we do well. This is what you do well. Let's come together and make sure our people are taken care of. And I hope to see more of that in the future.
Absolutely. Is there a book, a website, a resource that you'd recommend for, again, people in general, not just, youth, but just people in general, for how they can weather the storm of this pandemic?
So I've been thinking about two things. I think it's important in times like these to figure out root causes and really understand some of these things are symptoms of other issues that need to be dealt with, that we'll have to deal with after the virus is not an issue anymore, but we'll still be dealing with all the things we just talked about, right? Inequity and all of that. So there's a book, it's called Stamped, Racism, Anti-Racism and You. It's a remix from the book by, I wrote his name.
Ivan Max Kendi.
Yes, and Jason Reynolds. So Jason took the original book and kind of remixed it for young people. And I just recommend it for everybody, for teachers, for parents, to read with your young person and really understand the history of this country. And I think a lot of this will make sense after reading that. And of course, anything by, Ta-Nehisi Coates and all of those writers who have been talking about this and have been yelling into the bullhorn for a really long time. I think revisiting some of those works is important. So that's just for education. If you want to figure out on a political level and thinking about race and class, what's going on in the world, I recommend that book. If you just need inspiration and you just want to kind of take in some good works and be encouraged, I always go back to our ancestors, our poets and activists who left a record of, we've been through some hard things and this is how we overcame. So reading the poetry of Maya Angelou, Lucille Clifton, Gwendolyn Brooks, Langston Hughes. That's been encouraging me lately, of just kind of going back to their poems and thinking about, oh, they wrote this in the 40s, in the 50s, in the 60s, and thinking about what was happening in our world when they were writing those poems has given me a lot of strength and encouragement that I can keep on and keep on keeping on.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love that. I mean, I read Stand Toward the Beginning, the adult version, and I feel like it's the Bible on race. Like there's nothing else. There's no other book on race that needs to be written. Put your pens down. It's done. I just feel like that book is so amazing. And the fact that there's now this version for children. And I love that it's not a watered down version, nor is it like a summary. It just really is, how do you give the facts, but in a language that the youth can understand. And I adore it. So I 1,000% co-sign that recommendation, that resource. And to your point about going back to our ancestors, I do think that we can get caught up in our own experiences and think that what we're feeling is new, and realizing that there are other people who dealt with some really hard things. And unlike our experience, which feels quite shared in many ways, those experiences of being marginalized because of your race or your sexuality or those other things, those feel a little bit more singular than not that other people can kind of go on in the world and not have to deal with it. And so in a way, it's an even more amplified sort of difficulty that they had to take day in and day out. And there was no end date, right? For a lot of that. And so I agree fully that listening to their words and connecting with their journey may really help us manage in this time. As we wrap this up, for you, if you were to say in 5 words or less something to people for, again, how they can think through approaching this pandemic or taking care of themselves in the middle of it, what would you say?
How you can take care of yourself through this? Reach out to your people. I think sometimes we're trying to keep it together so much and be okay, and it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to need help. It's okay to just vent and be like, I know I'm going to be okay. Or in this moment, I'm really, and then whatever it is. So if you just have 1 or 2 people who you can call and be completely real with, I think that's really important right now.
Absolutely. And I know we've talked just in the news, it's been a lot about we're physically distancing, but we're still being socially connected. And I think you're hitting right on that for sure. If people want you to learn about more about your books or what you're doing with your nonprofit or other volunteer work, how can they do that? How can they stay connected?
Thank you. My website is my name, reneewatson.net. And all information is there about the things I'm involved in, projects, my books, and even recommendations for teachers to use in the classroom. So that's where you can find out more about me, reneewatson.net.
Awesome. And I will be sure to put that information in the link so everyone can access it with ease. Thank you so much, Renee. This is amazing.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you all for everyone who tuned in and watched it. I really do hope that you took some of these gems with you and that you are able to apply them in your life. Until next time, we will see you. Bye.
Bye.